Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for Kegels and Cocktails. I'm just letting everyone through the waiting room. And we'll get started in just a couple minutes. If you want to go, Kim and I just took a picture of our cocktails for tonight, which are actually mocktails. I'm drinking club soda. And Kim, what is in yours? Oh, she's muted. Sorry.
Sorry, I forgot I was muted. Mine's just electrolytes in water, like very fancy.
But that does not mean that this isn't going to be fun.
Exactly.
Right?
We can have fun without the cocktails.
We certainly can. And we're going to inform and have fun. And it's super casual.
I guess you want audio to hear what they're saying.
Nope.
Oh.
Always happens.
I don't want to be on audio.
Right.
We want you on audio so you can hear us, but you don't want to be on audio. So
I apologize, everybody. I am traveling. I'm on my laptop and some of the settings haven't transferred over to Zoom here. So I'll just fix that.
We've got a good group.
Yeah,
an amazing group.
Well, Kim, there was over 250 people who signed up.
Yeah.
So
well, that's
good.
awesome. Well, thank you for everybody who did. And even if you're watching on the recording, Shirley and I are neighbors. Literally, we could walk to each other's house in about 15 minutes. And we do sometimes meet in a beautiful park we have close by, and we gibby gab and catch up on things. But we love hanging out. We always have so much to talk about with ourselves and like amongst ourselves, but we also love connecting with our communities. And there are so many people in both of our communities. And so it's really cool that we get a chance to be together with all of you who are here and share some information.
Thank you, Kim, because you're actually the brainchild behind Kegels and Cocktails. So I think that's a really cool place for us to start. So this is super casual, everybody. Kim and I are going to share a little bit about what we do and our passion, and then we're going to take questions. So if you haven't already, do find the chat. You can start popping in your questions there. Anything to do with vulva, vaginal, and pelvic health. That's what we're going to be tackling tonight as best as we can. And we'll do our best. And then if you, as Kim said, if you are, you need to zip off before we finish, you'll get a copy of the recording tomorrow. You can watch, rewatch, share it with all your friends and loved ones. Yeah. And thank you so much for putting your pelvic health at the top of your to-do list tonight. So yeah, I would love to start there, Kim, because you are the brainchild behind the name Kegels and Cocktails. So why don't you explain to us what that means?
Where it started. Yeah. Well, I started this journey of talking about pelvic health as a business in 2009. So I had started it sort of like a side thing back in 2004, and it was very much was a side thing until 2009. And all of a sudden I had been laid off from my corporate job, and I had this little side thing that I thought, okay, let's see if I can turn this into something. And it became an e-commerce store for pelvic health products. And I thought, how am I going to increase awareness? We didn't have social media. You know, we had websites at the time, but I was fairly new. We had moved to Ontario for my husband's work. I didn't have a huge community of people. So I thought, how am I going to do this? And I said, I need to just start doing some in-person workshops or what have you. And so I was trying to think of names, and I said, well, people think of Kegels when they think of pelvic health, so Kegels. And then just one day it just popped into my head, and I thought, there you go, it's catchy. And it was 2009 was the first one, and it was at a beautiful old historic home in Burlington, Ontario, that had been transformed into a spa for moms. And they hosted us, and they had these beautiful rooms that we had, you know, some of it was for the food, and then we had speakers. It was a beautiful, beautiful event. And that's where it started. And there's been at least one every year since, including virtual, even when COVID hit, as we know.
Yeah.
And so really it's an opportunity to talk about pelvic health with an overriding theme of, it doesn't have to be icky. It doesn't have to be medical and boring and I want this to be a place that is safe and fun. It's a girls' night out and a place where we can learn about stuff. Really, we should have been learning about way back when we were learning about menstrual health and sexual education and that type of thing, but we haven't, but we're here now and we can learn now and it's never too late. So that's how Kegels and Cocktails came to be. And everything that you do, you have been, so Shirley and I met,
Not me yet. You didn't talk about the Vagina Coach and what you do.
Okay.
So just give a little snippet of that.
So before I was the Vagina Coach, I met Shirley. I'm going to kind of weave you into the story. And loved her name, loved what she was up to. And I wanted her to speak at a Kegels and Cocktails event. And she said, no way, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. No, I can't do this. And
I don't know what I don't know.
yes. So, and now here we are. She's written books. She's done TED Talks. She's been on TV and you're just amazing. So at that time, I was still technically under this kind of brand fitness doula, because originally I was working primarily with pregnant women and new moms. And I also formed a second business called Bellies Inc. And we were trying to optimize postpartum recovery. And fitness doula was who I was. I was a personal trainer. I combined that with postnatal, and there you go. But then my business partners and I started to navigate perimenopause. We started to work with people who maybe had never been pregnant or who were in perimenopause or postmenopause. And we said, this is not just a do your Kegels in pregnancy and here's some stuff for your postpartum recovery. This is a lifelong conversation because we go through so many different transitions through our lives that influence our pelvic health and our vulvovaginal health. And so I knew that I wanted to expand to be able to serve that population with, and fitness doula didn't quite resonate. And I knew I needed a bit of a name change. And I was speaking to a group of women entrepreneurs at the Mompreneur Conference in Toronto in 2017, I believe it was. And I got up on stage and joked, because all the other people speaking had been some sort of a business coach or for entrepreneur type coach. And I joked, I said, now you have a vagina coach for your business. And that's where it came from. And that it was like, that's it, the light bulb moment. It's a word that nobody wants to say, but we have to normalize this word and it shouldn't be taboo. And thankfully, social media is starting to allow more. We can say the word vagina. We don't have to code name it. So that's where that came to be.
I love it. I actually love telling people I have my vagina coach. And then the next time I see them, they say, how's your vagina coach? I mean, it's worked into the vernacular so well now. It's amazing. And it is amazing to know and work with you. You've taught me so much and you've brought so much to the Menopause Chicks community. So this little collaboration of Q&A night with Kim and Shirley, I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, and isn't it interesting, when you started, did you think vulvovaginal health would become a major part of the community that you serve, and that you would then develop a product that would serve that community and those needs? No.
I mean, the best part about what I do, Kim, is that I learn something new every day. Mm-hmm. And I've had the chance to tell this story a lot, but this week in particular, when I started Menopause Chicks, first of all, I didn't know what I didn't know, as I've already mentioned. That was a little over 10 years ago. And then when I started the Menopause Chicks community on Facebook, which was in 2016, I thought, I will survey all of the people that have started to follow Menopause Chicks, and I will ask them what they want me to write about, and research. Totally in the back of my head thinking they're going to want to know what I want to know about, which at the time was brain fog, sleep deprivation, anxiety, and depression for the first time. I didn't even know that the survey was going to come back. And overwhelmingly, women were shouting, like, find me more options for vaginal dryness. Mm-hmm. And it sent me on this journey of research and collaboration and co-developing a vaginal moisturizer. And then more than that, really having women come back. And I know you get this too, but come back and say, I wish I had found you sooner. Yeah. Can't believe that this has, the positive impact it's had on my life, all those amazing, amazing testimonials. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, quite a journey. We've got some questions already.
Cool.
Want to go there?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Do you want to read them or do you want me to read?
Yeah, I'll read them for you.
Okay,
I think
go
they're
ahead.
gonna be for you first. The first one is I'm 78. Should I consider surgery for bladder prolapse? It's a good
Hey,
way to start out because we might not even know what a prolapse is.
yeah, let's go there. I'm just getting my little models. So
Okay.
here's a pelvis. Okay, this is a female pelvis, and in this inside area, the pelvic inlet, our organs sit here. So I'm going to show you the organs without the pelvis around and how they sort of line up together. So now this is, like textbook anatomy, but this is showing you what anatomically the position of our bladder, the vagina, the uterus, and the rectum. So this is where they sort of nestle in that pelvic bowl. And what happens in a prolapse is one or all of those organs can start to shift out of that proper anatomical position. And in the case of the bladder, it can bulge into the front wall of the vagina, the rectum can bulge into the back wall, or the uterus can bulge and start to descend from the top down. And prolapse, when you think of pelvic floor dysfunction, prolapse is actually more common than incontinence, although incontinence is the one that we hear all about. So we hear about that because we see pad companies telling us that it's just part of being a woman to leak urine, which it's not. But prolapse is never talked about, yet it is more common. 1 in 2 women have some degree of pelvic organ prolapse.
Wait,
And so,
tweet that out. No,
yeah.
I'm not tweeting.
So in the case of a bladder prolapse, so here is that vagina, let's say. Okay, here's the tube that's the vagina, the uterus and the cervix would be here. If you still have a uterus, some people have that taken out. The rectum would be back here and the bladder would be here. So the bladder is now pushing into that anterior wall. And she has said stage 4, which is the most advanced, where that bulge is actually come all the way down. So that if this is our vulva here, the bulge would be actually outside the entrance to the vagina. And it's not the bladder that you would see there. It's actually the wall of the vagina being pushed out by that bladder. So that's what it looks like. And a few questions, but here's my comments on that would be, it's not an easy answer to say, yes, you absolutely need or should have surgery. Surgery is absolutely an option to be considered. It can be a life-changing option. I would want people prior to surgery to see a pelvic floor physical therapist, make sure they have a consistent pelvic floor exercise program, check in with the health of the tissue of the vagina, so vaginal moisturizer, potentially vaginal estrogen. Make sure constipation is under control. And a pessary. So a pessary is kind of like an orthotic. We know orthotics that go into our shoes to help support our arches. An orthotic in the vagina is called a pessary, and it can help support the walls of the vagina and any sort of displaced organs. That can be life-changing as well. So I would check in to see, have those been pursued as options first? If not, highly recommend that you do. If not, or if you just say, no, I just want to go for surgery, then find a great doctor, understand your procedure, make sure constipation is in check, make sure you have pelvic floor physio on your team, your healthcare team, make sure you're doing pelvic floor exercise, because surgery, while it will eliminate the bother and some of the symptoms, it doesn't eliminate all the things that contributed to that happening in the first place. So if constipation, which is a major contributor to pelvic organ prolapse, is an issue, if that's not addressed, the likelihood of that surgery unraveling or failing is very, very high. And I think a big reason why prolapse surgery in particular there's such a high recurrence rate is because root cause is never evaluated. Pelvic floor physio is never recommended. I want to say never, but very rarely. And people don't stick to a pelvic floor exercise program. So I can't say a yes or no, but those are a few options to consider ahead of time. And also, even if you have tried them and they're not working, that doesn't mean that you won't still use pelvic floor physio and pelvic floor exercise leading up to and after your surgery.
Well said. Wow. I just learned like so much in that. And It reminded me of a story. I was talking to a girlfriend from university this week, and she was updating me on her journey. And I was, it shouldn't be an unusual story to tell, but it was heartwarming to hear that the gynecologist that she finally saw, it took a while to get there, was just so inclusive and respectful of pelvic floor physio and all of the work that the programs she'd been doing of yours. I know that like you work in your app and you work one-on-one with women, and he was just so supportive of that and her decision-making process along the way.
Yay. That's awesome.
I think that when I first met you, Kim, I told you the story about my mom, and that was quite different, right? It was like, you go, you see a surgeon, you get assigned, and you're having surgery, and you don't actually even know what's going on.
Yeah.
Or have you ever heard of the word pelvic floor physiotherapy or pelvic floor exercise, right?
Yeah. Times are changing for the better. So that makes me happy. I love, and I hear that more and more now, that people are being recommended to do exercise, at least as a go try this first. And I think pelvic floor exercise has come a long way too, because it used to just be do your Kegels and that was it. That's all we had. And now there's a much more sophisticated approach, whole body approach to the pelvic floor, which is awesome to see.
That's amazing. Okay, next one's for you too. Is a pessary, oh, sorry, I think I skipped it. Can muscle pain in the hips be related to pelvic floor weakness?
1000%. So if we come back to now I don't have my organs in here, but here's the pelvis again. And this is an inside view of the musculature. So there's 3 layers of muscles in our pelvic floor. And there's ones that you can't necessarily see here, but this is where, our femur comes into the hip socket, and here's where we put our hands on our hip bones, and we have abdominal muscles that wrap around here. We've got glute muscles here. We have deep hip rotators that influence and work together with the pelvic floor. So 1,000,000% hip pain can often be a sign of pelvic floor dysfunction. Low back pain. One study in Canada showed 95.3% of women with low back pain have some form of pelvic floor dysfunction. And that could be pelvic pain. It could be pelvic organ prolapse. It could be incontinence. Those are being kind of 3 main categories. And so, yes, 1000%. And oftentimes when there's pain, I don't want to say always, but pain is very commonly associated with overactivity. So tightness in potentially the hip muscles, tightness in the deep pelvic floor muscles. So here's the sacrum and the tailbone at the back. So deep around the muscles that wrap around the anus, the muscles that wrap around the opening of our vagina and our urethra. So again, there's 3 different layers and lots of kind of interweaving that happens. If we've had a surgery in our past, if we've had an episiotomy, if we've had tearing during a vaginal childbirth, if we've had a cesarean section, all of that scar tissue can interfere with muscles, which can then lead to maybe one side of the muscle being tighter than another. So if we have pain on one side of the hip or pain on one side of the back, or even in the pelvis itself. So see a pelvic floor physio. There is work you can do on your own with releasing tension. I've got lots of videos on my YouTube channel that's free for anybody to go check out, all about down regulating the muscles and the nervous system. Seeing a pelvic floor physio, they can do internal evaluation and treatment that can release tension or adhesions of scar tissue, work on trigger points, just like we may work on trigger points like in our neck or back. So that would be my first recommendation, is if you can geographically, financially, see a pelvic floor physio, and check out my YouTube channel for the free resources on down regulation, and then reach out if you have any other questions.
Amazing. Amazing. If you're just joining us, welcome to Kegels and Cocktails. We are having conversations about all things vulva and vaginal and pelvic health. And Kim and I are going to do our best to answer questions. This is not a replacement for health diagnosis or treatment. And I know that sometimes we can go really specific, and sometimes it is really hard to answer a question that's been typed into a chat. So we'll just take your cue and talk about that topic. But I think we have a lot of people who are really interested in this. So I just want to continue. I'm going to let a couple other people in. Why don't you talk about your app? Because I want to make sure, like my 2023 goal is that every menopause chick does the 28-day challenge with me. Like, I really want them to do that. So
yeah,
we do that.
the 28-day challenge was and is still the most common place for people to get started in understanding an approach that is not just do your Kegels. Many of them have probably been told to do Kegels, or they've been told not to because their pelvic floor is too tight, or they've been told that they need to do other pelvic floor exercise, but they're not sure where to start. And then we see ads for things like PeriFit and Kegel weights, and we think, oh, well, that's what I need. Because I have pelvic floor dysfunction, that means my pelvic floor is weak. That means I need to strengthen. So I need this device or product. And before you go there, again, pelvic floor physio ideally, but you can also start with a challenge. It's $27. That's it. And it is 28 days. You have a 10-minute workout each day that is a whole body approach. So it's not just, sit in a neutral pelvis and contract and relax your pelvic floor. It explains how to do Kegels correctly because no one's evaluated us. It talks about things like why your bladder is yelling at you to go to the bathroom so much more often and so much more urgently. It talks about what's happening in prolapse, talks about constipation, but it also gives you movements that are things, most of them are things you've seen in your other workouts, but it's how you apply your pelvic, how you bring the pelvic floor into that, both from an engagement and a relaxation perspective that trains the pelvic floor dynamically, because Kegels at every red light, sure, if you're doing them correctly, it's better than nothing, but that doesn't help you when you're lifting up a bag of groceries or when you're at your exercise class. So the app, my Buff Muff app, has the challenge in it. And it's usually like 100 to 150 people every month that go through it. And it's an amazing community of people that recognize, as you always say too, we're not alone in this journey. And they have access to ask me questions. There's coaching calls each week because the aim is to get these people to show them the hope, to show them the opportunity to get them moving again. So many people with pelvic floor dysfunction stop moving because they think it's going to make things worse. They've been told maybe not to, you can't run anymore, you can't jump, and that's not good for our bones or our brains or our hearts. So we can't let it be a limiting factor anymore.
And as a 28-day challenge person that I want to continue to do over and over again, the two things that I love about it, like this is not a stick person, off the internet. You're actually being coached by Kim Vopni, the Vagina Coach, and her videos and quality of the instructional videos are second to none. Like, it's really, really good. And the second thing that you need to know if you're anything like me is that it's an app. So you get reminders. And one of the challenges in sort of introducing this, at least it was for me, because I didn't even learn the word pelvis or pelvic health till long after I had already delivered 2 babies vaginally, which is like mind blowing that
it still happens.
Right. But you're introducing a new routine. And so it's really nice to have the reminders. And then thirdly, it's nice to have other people that are in there doing it with you.
Yeah.
Because they might ask a question that you were maybe thinking about when you were laying on the floor, doing your cat cow pose that I saw you do today, that kind of thing. And it's just really nice to have that community.
Yeah.
Within a community.
Yeah. It's fun. And I would love to welcome you guys there. So the challenge begins the 1st of every month. So the February one will be coming up. When you first sign up, you get access to Pelvic Health 101, which is again, some instructional kind of educational videos. And then on the 1st, all the content starts to unlock, and each day there's a new workout provided to you. And people who do that consistently within sometimes a week, but more often about 2-ish weeks, people say, I had a comment the other day, somebody said, I'm on day 20 and I just realized that for the last few days, I haven't even thought about going to the bathroom. I've been out running around and doing my errands and haven't leaked. I haven't had a sudden urge. And she said, this is truly life-changing. So that's why I keep doing it.
That's amazing. And I don't think I told you, but over the Christmas holidays, I ran into 2 people outside of the Facebook group where I spend most of my time, just on the street in casual conversation, who told me they were using your how to get back to sleep without peeing in the middle of the night technique.
Oh, that's
Remember that
cool.
video?
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, I'm using Kim's tips so that I don't have to pee in the middle of the night.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
good. You're making such a difference.
Oh, likewise.
Okay. Is a pessary a good choice? I'll just read the questions as they are,
Yeah.
and we'll decide. Is a
Yeah.
pessary a good choice for a 50-year-old? I have prolapse of the rectal wall into the vagina.
Yes. So prolapse of the rectal wall would be the posterior wall. That's called a rectocele. That's something that I had. I had a stage 2 uterine prolapse, and I also had a stage 2 rectocele where the rectum bulges into the back wall of the vagina. And I'm going to show you here. This is what some pessaries look like. So there's lots of different shapes and sizes. Some of them are not even on here. And it can be sometimes a bit of a challenge to find the right pessary. Most in Canada, it's usually through a urogynecologist. There are a couple of pelvic floor physios that fit them. But generally you have to make an appointment, you have to go. And if it's not the right one, you have to make another appointment and come back. So it can be a bit of a process, but it can be life-changing. Now with rectocele, especially rectoceles now, because we have like the rectum is a little bit longer here. And so if the bulge is happening lower down in the vagina, pessaries can be challenging because when you put them in, they're supposed to push everything back. But because of how far you have to push them in, it can sometimes go up over that bulge and aren't really as successful. But there are a couple. So a cube pessary, which looks like this.
Okay.
Right. And then that's called a tandem. So it would be kind of like 2 cubes. Those ones can be effective for a rectocele as well as other types of prolapse, but those ones can be successful. And I'm just going to see if there's a picture of the other one. Sometimes the donut, there's the donut, that can sometimes be for some people, but things like these, like the ring ones are typically not going to be as effective. So yes, pessaries are worth investigating and worth trying. There is one that's over the counter called the Poise Impressa. You can get these on Amazon and they look like, they go in like a tampon. So this is literally what it looks like when you're putting it in, except when you plunge it up, what comes out is this. It's sort of like a
cube.
Yeah, cubey kind of diamondy shape. So it's like this when you push it in and then it opens up. And again, these aren't super sharp, but those edges can provide support. And then when you pull it out, it kind of pulls everything together. So it's a little, it's more comfortable to pull out and it's not absorbent like a tampon. So that, again, because the wider part down here, it depends on where the bulge is, but that could potentially help depending on how low down the bulge is. So I would say, yes, 1000% pursue it. But I would say pelvic floor exercise. So strengthening the floor and hypopressives and avoiding constipation would be the top 3 things to do for a rectocele.
Bit of a theme here. We hear constipation a lot, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Can you touch on the lack of estrogen to arthritis type symptoms, or is that a myth?
Well, I say, I'm going to hand that over to you. I have thoughts on that yes, as we're approaching and moving beyond menopause, we have less estrogen and we can joint pain. Sometimes arthritis pain can be a symptom, but I know that you've done additional training in hormone. So I'm going to pass that back off to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said that it's a little bit of a challenging question to unpack, but the bottom line is, estrogen is this amazing hormone that has hundreds of jobs in our body when we produce it at the quantity and quality when our cycles are regular. And then as we reach menopause, estrogen is the hormone that goes for a very steep decline. And most commonly that can show up as dryness, like in our eyes and our mouth and our vaginas, but it can also lead to cognitive changes. It can lead to joint and bone health changes. It doesn't necessarily mean arthritis. Arthritis is a diagnosis of a specific condition that I don't really know much about, but it's kind of like, I mean, I have some terrible analogies, but I continue to use them, like your windshield wipers on your car, they don't work very well if the gas tank's not full. And it's not that those two are connected, but they are connected because it's about the whole vehicle operating at its best, optimally. And it's hard, it's challenging for women's bodies to operate optimally without that same quantity and quality of estrogen that we once produced on our own. That's what I'd say about that.
I would agree.
Okay, I haven't even pre-read these ones yet, Kim. How's your drink? How's that big blue drink? Cheers.
Getting there. I'm like a quarter of the way through. Yes, cheers.
Cheers, everybody, to Kegels and Cocktails. Are color changes of the vagina area from pink to various browns a natural part of aging or a sign of vaginal health change?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So it's really important. Again, I wish the seed was planted earlier, but to look at our bodies and take a mirror and have a look. And that we don't have to look every day, but kind of like we do breast self-exams, we can look at our vulva and we can see changes that happen. So typically color changes in the realms of browns and pinks are not as, they aren't necessarily suggesting something more so than changes that can be more on the white side. So if there's really, really light pink getting to kind of grayishy white discoloration, that can be an indication of changes, specifically something called lichen sclerosis. And that's more commonly kind of in the autoimmune category, but it can be quite common. And when we think of the changes that happen to the vulvovaginal tissue as we're aging and approaching and moving beyond menopause with the lack of estrogen, a lot of the burning, itching, bleeding can often be, oh, it must be a lack of estrogen. You've got vaginal dryness, and so this is your solution. But it's important to look, and again, pelvic floor physios also screen for this during their assessment to see if those changes in the color and the integrity of the tissue are actually down that category of potentially a lichen sclerosis type situation. So, so again, kind of in that pink and brown, not so much, but if they're getting into the lighter type of white and gray, then I would go seek out some help.
I love that how you answered that question, because I think it's something that I don't remind our members of enough. And that is like, have a baseline. Like there's really no such thing as the right color or wrong color. But if you know yourself, if you know what you look like, then you're more likely to be able to notice changes.
Right.
And get curious about those changes, right? Like flex the curiosity muscle, and might be nothing. Yeah. Might be something. Yeah. Yep. Very cool. 3 weeks ago, I had surgery to repair, long day, posterior vaginal wall prolapse. Already had seen a pelvic floor physio, use the vaginal moisturizer, and do my Kegels. My question is, when should those be resumed? Should I wait until 6 weeks post-op?
Awesome. Yeah. Congratulations on your surgery. And I love that you have done all the things. And that's awesome, because that was your prehab. And now you're on the rehab side. And the way that I look at, and when I went through my own pelvic surgery as well, I looked at the principles that I had always been preaching with regards to postpartum recovery, and kind of applied the same thing, where there's been kind of a planned trauma, if you will. And there's been some disruption to the nerves and the muscles and the tissues. And now we need an opportunity to kind of get some reconnection there with the mind body, connect back in with the pelvic floor, get some blood flow and circulation, remind the pelvic floor what it does and how it works with the breath, and then start to layer in some movement. And then we start to progressively load that movement. And it's a series of weeks and months. The challenge is when we're working with medical providers, that's their expertise, is performing the surgery. I mean, I don't want to say just surgery, but that's their realm. And the guidance that's typically provided is gentle movement, and they'll often say gentle yoga type exercises, and no heavy lifting for 6 weeks. And then there still is, like postpartum, this 6 week, magically everything is back to normal. And I disagree with that. I think that at 6 weeks, 6 to 8 week time frame, that's your green light to go back to the pelvic floor physio. And they can then look for how the scar tissue is healing, see the response of the muscles, and check you in some gentle movement, and then start to potentially layer. So in the first 6 to 8 weeks post-op, I do, within the first like 2-ish weeks, nothing. You're not against gravity, you're resting, you're nourishing your body with food. People are bringing things to you. You're not really doing a whole heck of a lot. After that, then start to bring in some of the gentle, like hip raises, pelvic tilts, knee fallouts, heel slide type exercises. And if it feels okay and accessible, some gentle pelvic floor contractions. Now, get some clearance on this from your physician first. Yeah. Many of them will say at least hold off for 6 weeks. If you talk to pelvic floor physios, many of them are promoting a few pelvic floor contractions a little bit earlier than that, but you want to work together and collaboratively on that with your physician. But if they don't want any pelvic floor engagement before then, wait for your 6 weeks, see your surgeon, see your pelvic floor physio, and then you're starting that reconnection practice. So I have an 8-week recovery protocol called the Core Confidence Program. It's free. If you go over to my Instagram bio, click in the link tree and you'll find it in there. And that's what I would do. And that's your retraining protocol. And then from there, you take those same movements, you look at the bridge and you're like, okay, I'm ready for more. And now you're going to put some resistance band or some weight on your hips, or you're going to do a hip thrust. And another exercise was the seated march. So now you're going to do seated march with some arm motions. So we progress, and it's not till about like 6 to 8 months post-op where you are potentially back to where you were before. So that's my approach. It's much more conservative because I want to retrain the system, progressively load. That's a principle of fitness, is progressive overload. And at 6 weeks post-op, after having not done anything, to going to 6 weeks, which people are like, woohoo, I don't have symptoms. Now I'm going to go back and do something. Usually it's too hard too soon. And we've missed out on that retraining and that progressive overload. So that would be my recommendation there.
That's a great answer. And I'm not sure that it's related specifically to this person who's asking, but I will never forget the day you told me that some women have to have more than one surgery. And the goal of having you here tonight and getting this information and education is that surgery is okay, but you probably really want to work on your rehab so that you're not having it twice.
Yeah, there's a huge, the recurrence rate is pretty high, and it's usually within the first 2 years. And and again, I believe that is because we aren't given information about a recovery protocol. We don't get told about a gradual progressive rehab and rehab progressive overload. We go from 0 to 60. And also, if we haven't addressed constipation, or if they have a poor heavy lifting strategy and they go back to heavy lifting, the chances are higher. And if you have your uterus removed, if you have your uterus removed for prolapse, you're at an increased risk of prolapse, and even more so if the reason you had a hysterectomy was because of prolapse. Right. And that's more kind of looking at that root cause thing. So it doesn't have to be that way. Keep doing your pelvic floor exercise, be very consistent. I love hypopressives, especially people who have a hysterectomy, and see your physio once a year.
Awesome. She also asked about when to use the vaginal moisturizer. And although there should be no reason not to resume moisturizing, get physician clearance. Yep. Same for that, as Kim said. I have many members who, will use it externally, yep, and then use it internally as they progress through their rehab.
Yeah, 1,000%.
The best direction there.
Yeah.
Okay. In relation to vaginal dryness, is there anything we know we can do to help prevent it? Yes. Or is it somewhat unpredictable? Also, yes. And would you recommend using vaginal moisturizer during perimenopause? Yes. Postmenopause? Yes. Even if you don't have vaginal dryness currently? Yes. I'm wondering if we can use vaginal moisturizer similarly to skincare routine for your face. Yes. 1,000%. Great, you just answered all my questions. My work here is done. So the inside scoop for those of you that that haven't heard is that moisturizing with hyaluronic acid, and hyaluronic acid is a naturally occurring molecule that our body makes on its own until we're like in our 30s and 40s, and then it starts to decline, and it does decline more rapidly and significantly post-menopause. So moisturizing with a hyaluronic acid, like using hormone therapy, we talked about estrogen a couple of minutes ago, it's a way to give back your body what it used to make on its own. The other thing that I would say to this amazing person who asked the question is skin is skin. Like, we spend a great deal of time, energy, and resources thinking about the skin on other parts of our body, i.e. the hands and face. I forget what the dollar volume is that women spend in a year on facial creams. And this is another important part of our skin that we need to take care of for a multitude of reasons. Enjoying penetrative sex comfortably comes to mind most often, but it's also about sitting comfortably, moving comfortably, going to yoga, doing your pelvic floor exercises comfortably. And then as we get past menopause, it can also be a way to prevent recurring UTIs and just support the overall health of the pelvic floor. So yeah, you did answer your question, but it's a great one. So what else would you add to that, Kim?
I would say, as you said, yes to everything. I have been using it proactively for now. I am post-menopause now. I was maybe like experiencing a little bit, but I had been using the vaginal moisturizer in anticipation. And I didn't necessarily, I've never really wanted to wait for something to happen. I've always wanted to be proactive. So I recommend everybody start using it. There's no too soon, just start. And I use it, like the other day I use Kegel weights every once in a while. And instead of a lubricant, I actually put it onto my Kegel weight because it just because it was there. And it's also kind of like, okay,
it was where you needed it.
It helps put it where I want it. Right. And so I don't like, it's not to take the place of lubricant, especially with in sort of sex. But it helps make those things more accessible. And I wholeheartedly say yes to everything that you asked.
Yeah, it really great. I didn't plant that question, but it's an excellent one. And it's important to note too, you might be here because you are on your journey of perimenopause to menopause and beyond, but vaginal dryness can happen at any stage, any age and stage. So we think about it being something that women who have reached menopause or post-menopause are dealing with. But the reality is it can happen in postpartum. When hormones are fluctuating, it can happen in perimenopause. It happens to a lot of women who are on the birth control pill are dealing with vaginal dryness, which is quite sad. So get the word out. If you learn anything here tonight, make sure that you tell the women that are younger and the women who are older who you love, because it's important. It's important. Okay. Oh, can I pop the challenge app name into the chat? Kim, can you do that? Just put the URL in there for Kim's 28-day Buff Muff challenge. And oh, good. And somebody just signed up for it. That's amazing.
Hold on a second. I left off an F. There you go. The second one is the proper link.
Lots of
thanks.
Okay, cool.
Thank you for signing up.
Buff Muff challenge. Just go to vaginacoach.com. You can find it there. And this next question is, besides Kegels, what are some types of other pelvic floor exercises?
Yeah, great question. So a Kegel exercise, for those that maybe don't know, I think most people have heard that term, but again, we've never been taught or evaluated. So a lot of people have I think I'm doing Kegels impression of them, but Dr. Arnold Kegel saw his patients, mainly postpartum, experiencing challenges with contracting and relaxing their pelvic floor. And he used a biofeedback device called a perineometer that helped them see when the pelvic floor muscles were contracting and relaxing, even if they couldn't necessarily sense it. And part of the rehab was getting them back to being able to sense it again. That's where the Kegel started. This is back in the 1940s. And what has happened over time, like many things in fitness, is people think, oh, more must be better, or harder must be better. I'm going to squeeze like nobody's ever squeezed. I'm going to put weights in. I'm going to use this device. And those, they all can be valuable tools if the user, meaning us, is doing Kegels correctly and doing Kegels in a full range of motion. A lot of people interpret a Kegel as just a squeeze like you're stopping the flow of urine, squeeze like you don't want to fart. And what happens is people squeeze their inner thighs, or they squeeze their glutes, or sometimes they even hold their breath and bear down thinking they're doing a Kegel when they're not. And then they say, oh, well, the Kegels didn't work for me. But it's not our fault. Nobody's taught us, nobody's given us an evaluation. That's why gold standard to me is see a pelvic floor physiotherapist once a year. They can help evaluate. But we also have really good biofeedback in our fingers. We can insert 1 or 2 fingers. And if you use vaginal moisturizer, it will make that more accessible. But when you have your fingers inserted, what we should ideally feel when we do a Kegel is that there's a gentle hug of our fingers, a gentle draw up, and then a release. And some people say, I can't really feel the release, or I have a harder time letting go, or I can't feel the lift, or maybe my squeeze is not that strong. So there's lots of different things. And pelvic floor physios actually have an acronym called PERFECT. And it's, I won't go through all of them, but it's essentially with the way they grade the contraction strength, the lift, the release, the tone, lots of different components to see what your pelvic floor would benefit from. So Kegels can be, some people use the term reverse Kegels, where they focus more on the relaxation as opposed to the contract and lift. I personally don't love that term. I think Kegels are already complicated enough. We don't need to throw different terms around, but there's kind of up regulation, there's down regulation, and there's coordination into movement. So once we connect with the pelvic floor and we understand what a Kegel is and how to do it, and yes, I can feel it in my body, then we want to coordinate it into movements like bridges and squats and push-ups, even bicep curls. And that trains the pelvic floor dynamically. So when we think of a Kegel exercise, that's kind of one thing. And there's different ways. Some people talk about elevators. Some people use different cues. There's different focuses we can place on a Kegel. But ultimately, if you're contracting and relaxing your pelvic floor, you are doing Kegels. And when you coordinate it into movement, I think it becomes a lot more valuable. So that's kind of that piece. You can then add weights, devices. There's wands that help with trigger point release. Those are all helpful, but I would see a pelvic floor physio first so that you know if those are actually going to be beneficial for you. If you already have more tension in your pelvic floor and then you put a Kegel weight in, that's going to contribute to more tension. So I wouldn't go there right away. The other thing is hypopressives. So hypopressives are a form of exercise, really, really extra powerful for prolapse, I would say. That's what most people use them for, but they're great for our posture. They're great for incontinence. They're great for normalizing tone in the pelvic floor. They're good for sleep and digestion. They're just like one of my favorite exercise techniques. So that you could lump under pelvic floor exercise. And the final thing I'll say is resistance training, which we all would benefit from doing for our bones and our brains and our hearts and our muscles, like everything. Resistance training, especially that involves the lower body and the hips and the glutes, is also helpful for the pelvic floor. We just want to make sure that we have the resilience we need in the pelvic floor to be able to manage the loads of that resistance training.
Very good. Very good. What I want to add, because I think the way that we're talking about this tonight, for some ears, it might sound like, oh, this is too much. I already have a full plate. It's another thing, blah, blah, blah. And so I just want to insert here and remind everyone, Kim has taught me the benefits of walking backwards uphill. Thinking about your pelvic floor when you're walking the dog or when you're grocery shopping, right? And just going up and down the aisle or bringing the groceries in. So I love the work that you do because it's so incorporated into just, now it's just part of a daily thought process.
Yeah. And really, like I said, in Buff Muff, it's 10 minutes, 10 minutes. We all can take 10 minutes. We all deserve that 10 minutes. And if we think of, like, I just think of the reasons why a lot of people say, I don't want to end up like my mom. And it's a second reason for people being sent to nursing homes, because if you're caring for an elder person who can't stay continent, that's difficult for people to manage. So it's a leading reason for people to be admitted to care facilities. So stay out of Depends and diapers, sexual satisfaction, core control. Like people talk about core exercise all the time. The pelvic floor is the foundation of the core. The freedom to be able to go to activities without having to plan everything around your bladder. I had a client who had never given birth before. She was 64. She had chronic back pain. She would pee before she left the house. She'd pee at the golf course. She'd pee at 9 holes. She'd pee when she was done. She'd pee when she got home again. And it was just consuming her and controlling her life. And she got on vaginal moisturizer. She saw a pelvic floor physio. She did 10 minutes buff muff workouts every day. Her back pain went away and she could go through an entire golf game, no problem. And it totally opened up this freedom that she hadn't had for so long.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. The other thing about that is that, it's never too early and it's never, ever too late.
Yeah. 1000%.
Yeah, there's been a host of questions that have come into my queue over the last week that are like, I'm 66, is it too late? No. I'm 68, is it too late? No, it's never too early or too late. I scrolled to the bottom and I'm going to jump to Diane's question because I think it's really important. What vaginal moisturizers are good and can you use face moisturizer? Do not use face moisturizer. Although I said earlier, a few minutes ago, that skin is skin, there are products that are going to be approved for facial use and there are products that are approved for vulva and vaginal use, and it's really important because we have to be careful of what we're using on the vulva and inserting into our vagina. Diane, I don't know if we know each other or not, but I have been working on a project for the last 4 years almost in co-developing a vaginal moisturizer, simply because women in the Menopause Chicks community want more options. Some women are looking for hormone-free options. Some women are looking for that preventative option that another guest of ours asked about. You're not likely to get a prescription for localized estrogen therapy if you don't already have the condition, if you don't already have dryness. Doctors are taught to prescribe for something that already exists. But my philosophy is slightly a twist on that. I'm not opposed to localized estrogen therapy. I think you should use it and talk to your doctor about the potential benefits for you. But even though we can turn a raisin back into a grape, I'd much prefer to keep a grape. Totally. I just think it's easier, right? So that's where like the moisturizer comes in. This is the Feel Amazing moisturizer. I don't know how good my lighting is here. As I mentioned, I'm just traveling today, but it was compounded by Pure Pharmacy, as some of you will know, and now it is Health Canada approved. And it has an NPN number, which is a natural product number, and it is finally available in 3 sizes. So it's 30, 60, and 90 grams, and you can save when you big time when you order the 60 and the 90. And
it is very clean.
It's really clean. It's 2 medicinal ingredients are hyaluronic acid and vitamin E. So you're not going to get any of those other things that might be in your hand moisturizer or your facial moisturizer. It's also formulated to work with the vulva and the vagina. So there's no applicator. You just put it on your finger, insert it like a tampon, and it's a bit of a gel formula. Little sticky. I don't like using the word sticky because I think that gives the wrong impression, but it's formulated to stay where you put it. So you can put it inside the vagina, bring your finger out, maybe if there's a little bit left over, rub it along the vulva. And the results have been so overwhelmingly positive. I just really love hearing from women who thought that they didn't have any options. And now they have 1, maybe 2 additional options. Maybe they're trying some of the other things and they're coordinating it with Kim's instructional videos and her app. And then everybody's pelvic floor is happier.
Yeah. It's a great, I love it. I love that product so much. it does truly feel amazing. It's the best name for a product too, because it and sticky isn't, I don't think that's the right word, because sticky, I think of honey. It's not that, it's just, but as you say, it's supposed to, it's not goopy. It's a nice light.
It's not runny. Yep.
No, it's not runny. And it's really easy to use. And it really, truly is awesome. I love it.
One of the things that some people find surprising, even the guys that I work with at the pharmacy, is that I put it on when I get out of the shower and I get dressed right away. And some products in this area, we've been led to believe like you must use it at night and you must lay down afterwards and put your
let
feet
it absorb and
all these crazy things. It's like, no, it's just part of my routine. Like I brush my teeth and I moisturize my vagina.
Yeah. Done.
I think we've got time for a couple more, Kim. This has been really, really fun. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
By the way, everybody, if we don't get through all of the questions, I will continue to bring them forward in the Menopause Chicks community. Tomorrow, watch your email because there will be a replay of tonight's Kegels and Cocktails event, but I'll also include some links in that email to some amazing resources for all of you, and you can share those with all the people you love as well. Okay, where are we going to go next here?
I saw one about prolapse happening. How does it happen in the first place? So there's many different things that can contribute to prolapse. And I would say one of the biggest is pregnancy and childbirth. And the next biggest would be constipation. So that bearing down, that pressure that can be created through those two acts can be very damaging for the pelvic floor. So those are high up on the list of major contributors. One piece of research showed about 80-ish% of women have some degree of prolapse at 6 weeks postpartum, whether you have a vaginal or a cesarean birth. So cesarean does not make you immune to pelvic floor dysfunction. And about 50% of that 83%, I believe it was, have a stage 2 or greater. And the fact that this is not screened for it makes my blood boil. But so it's very, very common. Constipation, pregnancy, childbirth, chronic heavy lifting. So not so much like I go to the gym 2 or 3 times a week and I lift weights. It's more the people like letter carriers or care aides who are lifting and transferring heavy loads multiple hours in a day. Chronic coughing, higher BMI, so obesity, where you have extra weight on the body. There's debate and kind of research that's starting to happen with regards to looking specifically at exercise. And a lot of people were thinking, oh, CrossFit's very bad for the pelvic floor. Running is not very good for the pelvic floor. Runners is actually, they experience more incontinence and specifically anal incontinence actually than prolapse. And prolapse is a little bit more common with CrossFit. That being said, there was one piece of research that looked at light lifting, moderate lifting, heavy lifting. And this was like really heavy. I forget the exact weights, but very heavy weights being lifted. All the people in the study had prolapse. The people with the least amount of symptoms were the heaviest lifters. And a lot of people are told when they have prolapse, you can't lift anything over X pounds. You can't run anymore. You can't jump. You can't. And thankfully, there are a lot of people that call BS on that and have proven that it's actually really beneficial. It can be, but we need the right strategy. So we need the resilience of that group of muscles and we need a good lifting strategy. But pregnancy, childbirth, constipation, 3 biggest ones. The changes to do with the vaginal tissue in perimenopause and menopause can also bring about the symptoms for the first time or maybe exacerbate them. But prolapse can also be asymptomatic. So early stage prolapse especially can be asymptomatic. And so a lot of people don't even know they have it until years and years down the road and all these tissue changes that have happened, they had no idea. And that's another reason why I recommend seeing pelvic floor physio once a year. Like we go to the dentist for preventive maintenance of our mouth, go to the pelvic floor physio for preventive maintenance of your pelvic floor.
Very cool. Thank you. I could sit and learn from you all night. I think we promised that we would keep this to an hour, but I don't know what you think, Kim. I'd love to do this on a regular basis with you. I think there's a lot of questions that women have. If you're up for it.
I'm up for it. Always up for it.
We could have mocktails once a month.
Good. I think we should. Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. Everyone, I am going to send you a replay at this time tomorrow. So do check your inbox. I'll include some links in that email and do my best to get to the rest of the questions that are here. I do want to just take a minute or two before we say goodnight for Kim to remind everybody about the Buff Muff Challenge. And then I'll remind you about where you can get your vaginal moisturizer. And I hope that maybe you'll come back at the next Kegels and MOCKtails and tell us about your experiences, because I'd love to hear from more members too.
Yeah. I think that's an amazing idea. And of course, I think, clearly we have a whole bunch of people here. We have questions coming in that we can't keep up with. There's still 14 of them in the queue. Yeah. And this is a topic that needs a lot more attention. And I really love answering questions, and I love collaborating with other people who are doing amazing work like you. So yes, please, let's keep doing this.
Okay, good. Okay. Buff Muff Challenge starts when?
Buff Muff Challenge. So vaginacoach.com, you'll see the 28-day challenge at the top, or /Buff Muff. It starts February 1st. And it starts the 1st of every month. So if you can't make February for whatever reason, you can come in March and so on. And from there, I have lots of options to support you in the ongoing pursuit of getting back to potentially running or heavy lifting or whatever it is that you want to do without wearing pads, without the symptoms that are bothering you. And the Buff Muff Challenge is that first step, that retraining that takes a whole body approach. So I hope to welcome you in February 1st.
Awesome. Keep up the great work. And I want to remind everybody that, yes, I did play a role because of the members in the community in creating a vaginal moisturizer. But my ultimate goal is to make sure that every woman understands the full menu of options that she has available to her. So one of the ways that I do that is through a class called the Vagina Dialogues. It's free in the Menopause Chicks community. I'm going to be hosting it with some new friends of ours, actually, on February 16th at Intimate Wellbeing. I just published a guide to vulva and vaginal health, and really it just walks you through saying, these are the things that you can do to prevent vulva and vaginal dryness. These are the things that you can do to treat vulva and vaginal dryness. You can take it to your doctor. You can use it as a discussion guide. You can align it up with your values and say, that will work for me and that won't work for me. And that's great. And if you're interested in moisturizing your vagina and feeling amazing, you can go to moisturizeyourvagina.com. And we now have this moisturizer there in 3 sizes. And I was delighted to see that there's already a few people in the chat that are using it. So that's amazing.
Awesome. Yay. Yeah, it's so good. It is so good. I love it.
Thanks for doing this, Kim.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a great night, everybody. I'll talk
Thanks,
to you
everyone.
later. Bye.
Bye.